do the contribution. You're going to invest those dollars, and I'm going to show you some unique ways in doing that in a second. And you're not going to pay your medical expenses right now. So I have a high deductible because that is the qualifier. If I get sick and I have a surgery, I'm not going to use my HSA because I'm growing that HSA. I'm going to pay for it out of my personal funds. I'm going to keep really good records. And then down the road, say 10 years from now, I want to take out $50,000. If I have $50,000 in qualified medical expenses that I've accumulated, then I can go ahead and take that money out tax-free and go, on holiday.
It's my pleasure to welcome back my friend Darlene Root. She has been on the show before, and she has also spoken at least one of our live conferences before. And today we are going to talk about how you can use, the unofficial title of this presentation, I should say, is called Tax Friggin' Free. Okay. But we're going to talk about how you can use the HSA, the health savings account, as an investment vehicle. And you can buy real estate with it. You can do other investments with it. And I think you're really going to like this. So, Darlene, I believe you are sharing your screen now, right?
I do believe I am sharing.
Fantastic.
My screen.
So we have some people who will be watching this online and they'll get to see the visuals, some that won't. So let's explain the visuals to them if they're just listening to audio only. And let's go ahead and dive in. I love your quote to start with. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be with you again. It's been a while since I've seen you and been on your show. So this first slide was shared with me the other day in a conversation. And boy, isn't it true? There are two tax systems, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. And that was from a judge back in the early 1900s. So nothing has changed, nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah, right. Well, the quote is, in America, there are two tax systems, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. And of course, we all know the rich, the elite, they get away with murder as far as taxes. I mean, when we all heard a few years ago how Amazon.com had multi-billion-dollar profits and paid zero tax, we were just disgusted. Warren Buffett, who complains about the tax system and the hypocrite that he is, takes advantage of everything. In fact, he sued the IRS over a tax issue. So it's just total hypocrisy. It's really unfair. But look, the system is what it is. None of us are going to change it. We might as well use it to our advantage and do what the government wants us to do, what they're rewarding us to do. So let's do that. And that's just, that's just being a good citizen.
Yeah. And that's why this conversation is so timely, because most of us are uninformed as Americans. We don't realize that we can do a fair advantage without cheating the system. Right. And those advantages are provided by the IRS.
Sure.
So first of all, I need to say who I am.
Yep.
And you and I have similar paths. We both got our real estate licenses when we were 19, of course, different years.
Funny.
And I started selling real estate just like you did. And then in 1983, I saw a guru who came through town teaching no money down techniques, and bought the course and took off. But one of the things that I add to that, Jason, is I do it tax frickin' free as much as I can.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. I do also specialize in entity structuring, putting things in trusts and LLCs. And you and I have had conversations, and these are layered things. And I do the trust basically for anonymity.
And I think it's wise, we should make the disclaimer, neither of us are tax professionals and neither of us are attorneys. So please consult attorneys, tax professionals, get the advice you need. This stuff is very, very complex.
Yes.
We're giving you the basic idea. We're sharing personal experiences. Darlene will, at least. I might throw in some of my own, but seek out professional advice for your particular situation. This is just for entertainment purposes only, as they say.
That's exactly it. And that's my next slide.
Good.
I told you who I was. This is who I'm not. I am not any of those that have initials at the end of the name. I'm just somebody who's been doing it. And I use legal counsel a lot because you can do things wrong in your IRA and have it blow up. And nobody wants to pay more taxes than they need to. So this slide is probably the one that puts nausea in my stomach when I look at this. And you can go to usdebtclock.org, and don't do it now, but you can watch how our government is misappropriating our tax dollars. And at the time the slide was done, which was about 3 or 4 days ago, it was 28 trillion and change. I went there this morning just to update it, and it's getting closer to that 29 trillion and change. So it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And so we need to get a hedge against that.
Right. And that is likely going to create even more inflationary pressure as we go through the years, because that it's a good business plan for governments and central banks to inflate their debt away, as I teach with my inflation-induced debt destruction philosophy. So let's take advantage of every tax saving opportunity we can.
Yeah, and you do a great job in your podcasts about the 2 ways governments spend or pay for everything, and that's taxation and inflation. And inflation, as you know, is a hidden tax, and it's done obviously to dupe the minds of Americans. We think it's done by the consumer price index, and we know that that's not the case. And it's a hidden tax that destroys our purchasing power, and it is understated to keep Social Security entitlements artificially low. So as we race toward the baby boomer, I'm a baby boomer, you're not, as I race toward that retirement age for the Social Security eligibility, that's going to be lower and lower as we press on. So Jason, you already do a beautiful job of talking about the Chapwood Index and how that really is the real measure of what inflation is. We know that inflation is held artificially low. I couldn't find an updated Chapwood Index. I think the latest one.
Yeah, I know it's not very published very well, or I don't know where to look for it. But the last one I saw, Darlene, it was probably the same one you saw, that basically showed the real inflation rate in several.
Yes.
I mean, I looked at maybe the top 30 biggest cities in the country or metro areas, and the inflation rate is essentially between. And this was a few years ago, so it's even worse now. But it was between 8 and 12%, or 8 and maybe 13%. I can't remember exactly. And, the Chapwood Index is not manipulated like the consumer price index. So it's a much more reliable measure, in my opinion.
Yeah. And if you haven't heard, I don't know what episode it is, but you talk about that in great detail and how it's measured. And so I will leave that right there. This is daunting. This is actually a 2020 slide, and I updated it from previous presentations.
So let me share what's on here for the people listening only. So basically 33% of Americans have no retirement savings whatsoever.
None.
Only at the other end of the spectrum, and this is amazing, 13% have over $300,000. And by the way, if you think you're going to retire and have a middle-class lifestyle with $300,000, you're out of your mind. So I doubt anybody listening believes that, but I'm saying it to generally speaking. But back to the other end of the spectrum, which is really scary, 23% of the people have less than $10,000.
This is crazy.
I mean, this is unbelievable. So the vast majority of people are woefully unprepared. So what can they do, Darlene?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I'm just going to go through this real quick because it goes the woefully unprepared. And that was an adult was 18 and over, by the way, it was the average American adult. But Social Security is going down. The average check is $1,400 and change per month. And like you said, if you think you're going to retire on that, you hit the nail on the head. A retired couple is 65 years old. Can expect to pay $300,000 in retirement in healthcare alone. And that's not healthcare premiums. That is healthcare expenses. And when I say during retirement is 20 years. They're taking 65 years old to 85 years old, and you're going to spend $300,000 just on medical expenses. That does not include long-term healthcare, and Medicare only covers a limited amount of that long-term healthcare. So that's a pretty scary thought. When you said you're not going to retire in 300 grand, no kidding, that is just going to go for medical expenses in the long run. And here's some statistics. It's healthcare spending is expected on an average to rise more rapidly than the rest of the economy. No kidding, baby boomers are all racing toward that finish line right now. And I believe you're a Gen X, aren't you?
Yep. I'm in the middle. Yeah.
You're in the middle.
I'm the generation everybody forgot about.
The forgotten, the lost generation.
The middle child of history.
Yeah. Well, healthcare is going to be about 15% of the average retiree's annual expense. That's scary. Yeah. And unlike my parents' generation, I won't have access to employer or union sponsored retiree benefits.
So yeah, this is good to share. Darlene, our listeners are so well informed. I think they all understand the problem is terrible.
Yeah.
So let's kind of jump to some of the solutions.
Sure.
And, because you've got some really creative ideas on this stuff. And I absolutely love hearing from you when you've presented to our group before, just really creative, interesting stuff. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, this slide right here, invest for your future, tax-free and debt-free. I have a question mark on that because I don't believe in the debt-free. And I know I would get Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey is in elementary school when it comes to this stuff. Yeah.
So, but there's a right way to do it. And we don't mean debt-free, refi till you die is your mantra. And I'm in agreement to that. So let's talk about some of the tax advantaged, tax-free and tax deferred methods. And then I'm going to hone in on one if you'll allow me to do that. Sure. All of these are self-directed. And for our listening audience that can't see, I'm going to blow through these. The self-directed IRA, that's just the traditional garden variety IRA, which is tax deferred. And then the 401k, another tax deferred. And then there's this really cool one called the 401k Roth. And it has all of the advantages of tax-free with the advantages of getting debt without having to pay unrelated debt financing income. And that's a whole lesson in and of itself. We have the traditional IRA, which isn't necessarily self-directed. It might be with your employer. My fave, two of my favorites. One is the Roth IRA, because that's tax frickin' free. Then you have the simple, the SEP, the solo, and the HSA. And HSA stands for Health Savings Account. And what I love about this over the IRA, the Roth IRA, is it's sort of the trifecta. You get a tax write-off going in, your contribution is a tax write-off, and it is tax-free investing while it's in your HSA. And then when you take it out, it's tax-free. So it's the triune, tax write-off going in, investing tax-free while it's in your HSA. And then when you take it out, it is tax-free. Now there are some rules about that, and we're going to go over that in a minute.
So this is with the HSA. That doesn't apply to a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA.
Correct.
They don't get all three of those.
You can.
Some of them. Okay, well, we'd like to hear about that. But, the thing that strikes me about the HSA, and I'm sure you're going to cover this, is it seems like you wouldn't be able to make very large contributions to it.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
Good. So you saw my slides, apparently. You don't need to make large contributions to it.
Oh, well, okay. So by the way, this is why I asked Darlene to be back on the show, because I reported maybe a month and a half ago or so about Peter Thiel, the most brilliant person in Silicon Valley. If you ask me, read his book, 0 to 1. It's excellent. He has over $5 billion, that's with a B, $5 billion in a Roth IRA. It's the biggest Roth IRA in the country. And there are a few other bigwigs who have some pretty big Roth IRAs too. So you make money in the plan. But what he did is pretty unique, obviously, Darlene, because, he was one of the original investors in Fakebook. I hate that company, but we all use it. And some other startups that just went parabolic. What are the chances, right? But if that's inside the Roth IRA, that's how you get the trifecta, right? Because, I can think of two things, because you don't pay on the way out. Okay, when he takes
in the
money
HSA.
out of that. Oh,
so he did a Roth.
Yeah, I know.
He could have done it in an HSA.
So the Roth, he got two of those three, right? He invested the money post-tax. He paid tax on the money, then put it in his Roth IRA. But once it's in there, he can invest it tax free. So he's got one thing there. And then when he takes distributions later at 59 and a half or has to at 70, he gets those tax free under current law. But I worry they'll change the law. And so how do you get all three in the HSA?
So I'm going to guess that he did not do this in a Roth. Of course it is in a Roth, but at the time he opened up the Roth, he did this in 1999. And I want to put some framework around it. You can really max out your IRA or your HSA in a very short period of time. Of course, Peter Thiel did it in a unique way, and some of those things are not available to most of us. But he did it with a $2,000 contribution in 1999. Now, I'm going to guess that he did not make that contribution into his Roth because there are income limits to having a Roth. And in 1999, he was part of PayPal, if I'm not mistaken, or he was joining in, and his income probably would have been too high. I think at that time it was 140,000 or something. And so he would have had to do what is called a backdoor IRA, a Roth IRA, where he put it in a traditional, rolled it over into a Roth, and you're allowed to do that. So I just wanted to say that I'm wondering how he actually did that. He doesn't go into detail.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Bottom line is that you can do it with one contribution. He's never made another contribution to his plan. And he has just used that and it's not his piggy bank yet. Unlike the HSA, he cannot take that money out until he's 59 and a half. HSA, you can do it right now. So the contribution limits for an HSA are small, $3,600 if you are single, $7,200 if you are a family, and catch up is $1,000 if you're 55 years or older. And so I don't know how old you are, Jason.
So how are we going to make any big money doing that?
Sure.
I mean, I'm thinking like a single person, what do you say, $3,600 a year plus if you're over 50, I think you said another $1,000 you can
55.
put in every year? 55. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you could put another 1,000. So a 55 plus year old can put in $4,600 a year, and a married couple can put in $8,200. I mean, like this is nothing, right? How are we gonna buy real estate and do big deals here?
I'm gonna show you.
Okay.
Well, I did want to go back, digress a minute. Now, understand that the contributions are tax-free. You can invest tax-free, take it out tax-free, but they have to be for qualified medical expenses. And here's really where I wanted to stick this. Well, what if I don't have $5 billion in medical expenses? You're not going to do everything in your HSA. And what you're going to do is you're going to do the contribution. You're going to invest those dollars. And I'm going to show you some unique ways of doing that in a second. And you're not going to pay your medical expenses right now. So I have a high deductible because that is the qualifier. If I get sick and I have a surgery, I'm not going to use my HSA because I'm growing that HSA. I'm going to pay for it out of my personal funds. I'm going to keep really good records. And then down the road, say 10 years from now, I want to take out $50,000. If I have $50,000 in qualified medical expenses that I've accumulated, then I can go ahead and take that money out tax-free and go, on holiday. So you're going to, like I said, you're not going to have every one of your investments in here. At least build it up to where you have $500,000 in there, because we already saw that medical expenses are going to be at least $300,000 in your retirement. So these are just some tools in the tool shed, but you can, as any of our listeners, if you're 45, you open up an HSA today and you start doing some real estate investing, and you build that out, and you're paying your medical expenses for you or your family. And you decide at the age of, 46, you want to take 50, 60 grand out. If you have 50 or 60 grand in there, you can, as long as you had qualified medical expenses to offset that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just hopefully nobody will really have those medical expenses that are significant at all. So, it just sort of begs the question, how are you going to really use this then? It's still medical expenses even after 59 and a half, right? Like with a traditional IRA or self-directed IRA, right? You can start taking distributions that are taxable if it's not a Roth, right? After 59 and a half. So with
Correct.
this plan, when you're 59, is 59 and a half still an age that means anything with an HSA?
No,
No.
it's now. It's today. If
Okay.
you open it up when you're 20 and you start investing and you're really building it up using some of your techniques, some of mine, and you stockpile that, say, for instance, in a couple of years, you have 100 grand in there. Let's just say that.
All right.
And you've paid your medical expenses out of your own pocket. So you have $50,000 in medical expenses. You, at any age, can take that money out. You can reimburse yourself.
But it's only for medical. So
only for medical.
Right. But what happens if you want money out and it's not for medical?
You can't. So it has to be for qualified medical, but you've already paid those medical expenses, say, over the years. And I did this before I was 59. And
so in other words, you can go back and pay all your old expenses. Got it.
Any of the expenses during the time you had your HSA.
Oh, no, but so, only when you had your HSA. So
sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't set up an HSA today and then pay your medical for the last 20 years.
No, wish you could, but can't.
But
no.
This money is not locked up completely, right? You can liquidate the plan, I'm assuming, with a penalty.
You can, just like any of the other self-directed, the other self-directed.
So you would have to pay the tax, and I believe the penalty is like 10%, right?
Correct.
So tax plus 10%. By the way, don't quote us on any of this stuff, folks. Check with your advisors. Right. But that's how it works, right?
And one of the reasons I like this tool is you do get the tax write-off going in. So every year you're just going to get a tax write-off and you're going to invest this, but you're not doing just your HSA investing. Here are a zillion different things you are going to invest with, but I couple my HSA along with my Roth IRA, and then I partner with other people. So you can get what I call fat stacks in a short period of time if you're partnering. Okay. And for those who are not able to see the slides, you can do basically any type of investment in an HSA that you can do in a self-directed IRA or any of the other.
And pretty much what Darlene's saying there is arm's length type investments where you don't take possession of a painting that's going to hang on your wall. That's not going to qualify. No gold coins that are going to be in your house.
No.
Okay. But, rental properties, real estate partnerships, flipping houses, mobile homes, raw land, vacation homes, not for personal use though.
Yes.
So vacation rentals, we should say, assisted living, precious metals, but you must have a custodian, not you. You can't take possession. Private equity deals, private LLCs, private placements, cryptocurrency. I'm not a huge fan of cryptocurrency, but this does seem like this kind of vehicle, whether it's a self-directed IRA or an HSA, would sort of lend itself to that because of the craziness of the huge potential upside. Of course, that you could have a huge potential downside too. Some of these go to zero. There's a graveyard of coins that never made it out there. Like over 1,000 of them, I believe now.
Yes.
So be careful. Crypto is very risky, and I would not call it an investment, but a speculation. But so was founders stock in Facebook for Peter Thiel, right?
Absolutely.
And so if you have something that has that big potential capital gain, this is pretty great for that, I think.
It is.
Right?
It is. And like I said, I spread the love amongst my self-directed, some of the stuff I do in my HSA, because I'm still building that up. And some of the stuff I'm doing in my Roth IRA, and some of the stuff I partner with my own personal self. And you can do that as long as it's done correctly.
Yeah.
There's also discounted mortgage notes, performing and non-performing, and buying partial notes. And that's a real quick way to at least get your money deployed out there. Okay. But in the rental, well, you can't buy a rental for $3,600. Close. I actually have, it's one of my slides on a high risk rental that I bought for 12 grand. And I think you know of that one.
Where was that? Did you buy that on eBay? And
I actually bought that in a nice little community, but it was a short sale. This is back in the short sale days. I paid 12 grand for this house and did absolutely nothing to it. And I rented it out to somebody who had a medical marijuana grow facility.
Okay.
And they paid me $1,500 a month. And I kept the house for 5 years. And so this is tax freaking free. Turned around and sold the property. I think we put 10 grand into it to sell it. So I'll go through the math in that in a minute.
Interesting.
But here's how you can get fat stacks in your IRA a lot quicker than just, $3,600 in cryptocurrency. You can partner with your non-IRA money. So you're going to bring two elements to the party. Your other retirement accounts, other people's retirement accounts. I call them financial friends or friends with benefits. It's a different connotation now.
We get it.
Your spouse, there's a typo on here, or any other family member's IRA. And a lot of people are going to cringe right now going, no, you can't do that. You can only invest with your brother or your sister. That's not true. You can't borrow money from your mother's IRA, but you can partner with your mom. When you're doing these types of things, the paperwork and the timing of everything is crucial. So don't drive the Ferrari without reading the owner's manual. Mm-hmm. And then other investors, non-IRA. And I do that a lot with investors, non-IRA money, people who just want to get a return on their investment. And so you want to make sure that you don't get into any SEC issues by pooling funds. And there are some ways to do that without getting your toes slammed in the door. So this one, I had $2,000 in my HSA. This is probably one of the first deals that I did. I had $2,000 in there, and I had 20 grand in my personal account that I wanted to invest. And then I found a financial friend who had $114,000, just personal money. And we partnered on a loan in disproportionate interest. And you have to be careful what vehicle you use in order to do that. But the term of the loan was 12%, 2.5 points for 12 months. I never saw the house. It was in Las Vegas. Did the paperwork and wound up putting a pretty healthy amount back in my HSA. So everybody has to have an agreement. There was a partnership agreement, and it was also done in a trust, hence the disproportionate money coming back out. So that was one of the very first ones. It was fun because I only had $2,000 to play with in my HSA. When the money went back in, incidentally, the profit had to go proportionately to my HSA and my personal funds. I couldn't go, all right, I'm going to take $6,000 to put it in my HSA and $2,000 in my personal account. It doesn't work like that. So I just want to make sure your listeners are aware you can do it right and still do it tax freaking free if you do it right. This was my high risk rental. This is the most favorite one that I did. This is the second deal that I did with my HSA, but not my, I had done many deals with my Roth. But I wanted to start putting money in my HSA pretty quick. And so, like I said, the purchase price was $12,000. It was just beat up, but we knew it was going to be medical marijuana. They were certified by the state of Michigan. Now it's legal recreationally, but then it was only medicinal. The rent was $1,500 a month. Why? Because nobody else was renting out their house. It was high risk. So we rented it out for 5 years. So that was like $90,000 in rental income, tax free, and then turned around and sold it for five years later. They decided not to have the grow facility any longer and sold it for $89,000. There were some closing costs and so forth in there. And we did have to put $10,000 in it to get rid of the mold and that type of thing. So, roughly $150,000 went back into my Roth and HSA in direct proportion on how I partnered with it.
Okay, these numbers do get bigger.
They do get bigger.
Okay. Yeah.
And so
and that's a high risk rental because it's just an El Cheapo property, and those are just fraught with a whole different set of problems than we usually talk about on the show. So you can reach out to us if you want more on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But now the big thing is medical, or not medical, but marijuana facilities. And you can buy marijuana stock, interestingly enough.
Sure.
And startups, and Peter Thiel, invest in a startup with a company. Marijuana isn't going to go away, although federally still illegal, air quotes. Each state is having their own little idea of what that looks like.
We got 19 states are legal, I think now.
Yeah. Okay. And so I did put this is an actual case, but not typical. And then some of the smaller things you can do, purchasing discounted notes. I do this in my Roth and my HSA, and you can buy a discounted note If it forecloses, you can do the foreclosure and then get the property back and outright sell it. There's a lot of things that you can do. And all of our notes are serviced by a third-party servicer. So we don't worry about collecting any of the payments. They just come in.
Right.
But you can do this really with what you have, Jason. It's purchasing real estate. Find partners that are willing to lend the money, even if you have to do the lion's share of the work. In the beginning, you're going to start building up your retirement account, your HSA account, and getting ahead instead of being that one in three people who doesn't have a savings.
Got it.
When it's all said and done.
Okay, good stuff. So Darlene, we've got to wrap it up, obviously, and that's really great. So thank you so much for sharing that. One last question, though. You are steeped in the world of the Roth style retirement plan or HSA, right? I have never converted my plan to a Roth because I'm just worried they'll just change the rules. I mean, the government is obviously very desperate. They've mismanaged their money terribly, as we all know. I'm just afraid they'll look for the low-hanging fruit and just change the rules. And everybody that will have paid taxes will just basically get burned, but hopefully I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, hopefully you are wrong about that. I'm not sure it's possible, not probable. I think one of the nice things about the Roth is I don't believe it would go away. The traditional might. They want the tax right now, right? When you open up a traditional IRA, you get a tax write-off with that money going in, and taxes deferred on the gain coming out. Our administrations, they're very short-sighted. They only think 4 years ahead of them.
Yeah, of
and
course.
they would rather have you pay the tax. They don't care if you're building it up tax-free. And so I'm going to say that the Roth is still mine. Roth and HSA tax-free is better than taxable.
Right. Good stuff. Darlene, where can people find out more about what you do?
So you can go to mutualinvestmentholdings.com.
Good stuff. Mutualinvestmentholdings.com.
Yeah.
Get advice from the appropriate tax or legal professional. I just want to say that again. And Darlene, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing this stuff.
I had a blast. Thank you for being gracious with your time.